Welcome, everyone, to Black Men and Healthy Relationships. Thank you for joining Black Men's Health today for this vital and important conversation that is on everybody's mind, especially brothers. Yes, we
Yes,
talk
yes,
about
yes.
relationships. We may not talk about it, y'all, but we are at the barbershop, we're with our boys. We might be even on an internet forum talking about relationships, but we are blessed to have Dr. Cortnie Baity here for this really important discussion. And before we kick things off, I'm going to read a little bit about Dr. Baity and tell you about who we have with us today. Dr. Cortnie S. Baity is a practicing licensed marriage and family therapist and owner of Onward and Upward Psychotherapy and Consulting Services, LLC. Onward and Upward Psychotherapy and Consulting Services is a Tallahassee, Florida, go Tallahassee, yes, based private therapy practice serving all Florida and Georgia residents. Currently, Dr. Baity provides online therapy to individuals, couples, and whole family systems, helping people to navigate a wide range of mental health and relationship problems. Her clinical niche includes working with issues surrounding relationship troubles, communication, life transitions, anxiety, depression, sleep disturbances, dating, self-esteem, personal development, and trauma. Although she enjoys serving a broad demographic of people, her current practice demographic makeup mostly consists of adults ages 20 to 45, women, Christians, and those of African American and Black descent. Dr. Baity also has specialized clinical experience working with veterans, being that she previously served as a readjustment counselor at the Department of Veteran Affairs. Dr. Baity is a two-time Florida State University alum, go Noles, earning a Ph.D. in Health and Human Services and a BS in Psychology at the University, a BS in Psychology at Florida State. A University of Kentucky alum as well, go Wildcats, earning an MS in Family Services with an emphasis on couple and family therapy, and a Texas Tech University alum in which she completed an accredited financial counselor distance learning program in personal finance and financial counseling. Dr. Baity identifies herself as a lifelong avid learner, servant leader, and advocate for health, including mental, physical, relationship, spiritual, and financial health. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Cortnie Baity.
Good morning, and good afternoon. Actually, we just switched over the afternoon hours, and it's my honor to be here. Takuma, you did an excellent job with that mouthful of reading my bio. But as our discussion will highlight, that I have been on a very intentional journey to seek knowledge and information to improve the quality of my own life and the lives that I'm connected to. So thank you all very much for having me here on Black Men's Health during Black Men's Health Awareness Month, which is very important and fitting to have this discussion today.
Thank you for being here with us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
You lead, Takuma.
All right. Well, I want to get started. We get started with a little icebreaker question. And I saw a quote that you included somewhere. I believe it was in a dissertation you had prepared. And I wanted to ask you what this quote means to you.
Yeah.
The race is not given to the swift nor the strong, but to the one who endures until the end.
Yes.
What does that quote mean to you?
Well, I kind of think about myself, and I know a lot of my peers may roll their eyes or be surprised to hear this, but I always kind of thought of myself as an underdog a little bit. I never felt like I was the absolute smartest, especially as I jumped from smaller ponds to larger ponds, particularly from Tallahassee Community College to Florida State to University of Kentucky for graduate school, and then back to Florida State for my Ph.D. is that I was always in rooms where people were better than me. They were more developed than me. They had richer soil that they started their beginnings of their journey in. And not to say that I had, impoverished or poor beginnings, but at the same time, you take an observation and you can pick up on things. And so I realized that, that I belong there, one, because God planted me in those spaces, even if the people around me were seemingly better equipped or more advanced in their training or their background. And what I learned was that it didn't matter that your soil was richer, that you had more resources or information. But if you endured the race, if you continued forward with dedication and diligence and intentionality, that the reward, the finish line will surely be yours. And so I've had experiences, particularly in graduate school, where I wouldn't say I was necessarily pointed out as you're going to be the one who makes it to the end. And it hurt me. It broke me down, but I repurposed it as fuel. I held on to my faith. I knew that God placed me in those spaces for a reason. And I endured. I maybe wasn't the strongest. I maybe wasn't the brightest. I maybe didn't have the most rigorous study or research background. But God used what I had, what he gave me, and that was more than enough. And I endured to the end, and I'm still running. So that's what that means to me. Yeah.
Wow, you just gave a testimony.
I love that. She said repurpose that
That's
as fuel.
right.
I like that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I'm holding on to that one for you,
Yes.
Dr. Baity. That's good.
Wow. Speaking of which, we like to ask our people we interview, like, what was it like growing up? What was your childhood like? And can you kind of talk about how, your intellectual interests got developed?
Sure. So growing up, for the first, I would say 12 or 13 years of my life, I grew up in a 2-parent household. My parents were together for a total of 19 years. They were married for a total of 16 years. So my earliest years, I had a very solid example of what a healthy marriage looked like, what a 2-parent household looked like. I was a huge daddy's girl. For a long time, I looked just like him, his twin. I've evolved till I look more like my mom now, which she's finally happy about. But yes, huge daddy's girl. It was just myself and my sister. My sister is 19 months older than me. And so we're very close. And so we had a very close-knit nuclear family. I will say that as I developed into my middle school years, my parents evolve. As you know, people grow, they change, they want different things, they discover themselves. And so they decided to part ways. And so that helped to influence my trajectory. And we'll talk about how I got into particularly the field and industry that I'm in now. But earlier on, I was always interested in science. I wanted to understand how things work, how things develop, how things became to be what they are. And I was also interested in arts. And I'm still very much so that person. I sing, I craft, love using my Cricut on my free time. I just love just kind of the beauty of the creativity in nature as well. God is the ultimate creator, and he's created us to be creators. And that's always permeated throughout my years, even as a child.
I know about the cricket. Don't think you slid that in, and Takuma and I are not in tune. I know about the cricket also.
Yes.
My wife informs me on the cricket, so I'm aware of it.
Yes. It's a very it'll take all your resources. I'll say that, but you can.
That's how I know about the cricket. No, but you're very, very talented in so many areas, Dr. Baity.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And so I know you mentioned, your academic trajectory earlier, but I wanted to ask you, was there a moment or a series of moments where you said, wow, I really want to be in counseling, particularly marriage and family therapy?
Yeah.
Can you take us back to that time, like the year, and how that crystallized for you?
Yes, absolutely. So it was kind of like an accumulation. It kind of wasn't like a aha moment type of thing for me. As I mentioned, when I entered into my middle school years, my parents' relationship, their marriage, and the family I had known for my entire life was dissolving. It was transitioning. And so that was a part of the influence. And so I went into psychology for my undergraduate study because I wanted to understand people. I wanted to understand their personality, their behaviors, their emotions, how they connected and related to other people. And during my undergraduate study, actually starting at Tallahassee Community College, where I did my AA, and then I transferred to Florida State, I took a class on marriage and family. And it was just like all the fireworks went off for me in that class. I remember talking to my mom and my sister and my friends just about what I was learning, and they're like, okay, it's class, but I was just very intrigued and passionate about the information. And it was also taught by a licensed marriage and family therapist who also had his private practice, who also had a Ph.D. And I was like, that may be something for me. So I held on to that. I graduated TCC and I went on to Florida State. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology. I fell in love with brain and behavior and neuroscience. And I thought I wanted to get my PhD in neuroscience until I had a conversation with a neuroscientist who said, this is not going to be the comprehensive type of experience from talking about a particular brain function and then how that connects to the larger picture. And so she said, if you really want to get involved with the comprehensive, direct nature of how these systems work in relationships and in everyday occurrences, then I would say more so of a clinical track. I graduated from Florida State in 2013. I took about 9 months off and I worked in the graduate school on campus at Florida State. So during that time, I kind of doubled that opportunity where on my lunch breaks, I scheduled meetings with different department chairs on campus to interview them and learn about their graduate programs. And so I met Dr. Kay Pasley. She's long retired, living her best life outside of the workspace now. But she was so instrumental in talking to me. And she said, well, Florida State has a PhD program in marriage and family therapy. So we're going to have to send you somewhere else for your master's. You have to have the clinical work, the clinical master's first, and then come back to us for your PhD. So she gathering information about my personality, my demographics, my cultural factors that she felt like would be a good fit for me. One of the schools that she listed was the University of Kentucky. I was like, I don't know too much about Kentucky besides Kentucky Derby and KFC. That's it for me. But I trusted her and I trusted the process. So I ended up applying for University of Kentucky. I applied for Auburn University. I applied for Purdue Calumet. And I think that was it. And I interviewed at all three of those. In-person interview at Purdue Calumet, in-person interview at University of Kentucky. And to my surprise, when I went to Kentucky, I felt like I was at home. And so, I also met one of my best friends that is still my friend. We went through the PhD trajectory together, even though she went back to her home institution in Minnesota. But saying all that to say is that, it was the perfect recipe at Kentucky. And so I went forward into the marriage and family therapy program there. And it was an opportunity for a level of self-examination that I could not have anticipated. They encouraged us to go to therapy ourselves so that we can have a perspective of being the therapist and being on the other side of the couch as the client, to help us better inform and be able to empathize deeper with our client's experience. And I remember I was nervous and I didn't know what this therapist was going to say and how they were going to take my emotions. And I remember I cried in the first session. And it's not that they changed the circumstances of my life, but something changed for me after that first therapy session. I said, oh my goodness, I know pain, I know darkness, because in earlier years of my dating and romantic relationships, as my parents were divorcing, I got into my own romantic relationship with a guy who was 2 years older than me. And we were in high school together, but as two immature individuals, as you're learning, you're practicing, but you're making mistakes, and other people become casualties of your pain and your mistakes. And so it was a difficult relationship, and I needed to release that. But that helped to inform my level of empathy that I had for people at such a very young age. Going through my master's program when I was 22, 23, I could reach people at a level of depth about life and love because of my own personal pains and experiences at such a young age. So that kind of continued me through that pathway. I got my master's in marriage and family therapy. I love working with couples. That's a very kind of controversial space for some therapists. They say, oh no, I can only deal with one person in the room at a time. And couples are very special because you're managing personalities, you're making sure that both persons feel heard. But I love love. I love togetherness. I love unity. I love having a safe space to talk about difficult conversations. And I love being a tool to facilitate those important conversations. And so, I got my master's. I moved forward to Florida State for my Ph.D. in health and human sciences. My emphasis was in human development and family sciences. I did not choose to do another clinical PhD in marriage and family therapy because I wanted to expand my area of research in order to inform my practice. So I took that pathway. I became fully licensed in the state of Florida. And, that's kind of how the story goes. It continues forward from there with clinical experience beyond that. And now I'm here in private practice. So, yeah, I know that was a lot.
What a rich background, though. I mean,
yes, thank you.
I'm sure all of that helps inform the work that you do today.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I think you're on mute. Takuma, I think you're on mute.
Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. Take three.
Okay.
I saw that part of your dissertation, you talk about financial socialization, and I want to bring it to kind of the present and in terms of what you're seeing with couples now. And can you talk about how this financial socialization affects relationships, especially among Black people, people of African American descent?
Sure. So I'll start with a basic definition first of what is financial socialization. Financial socialization is a theoretical, it's an academic term for basically saying what are the money messages that are being passed along from generation to generation. Those messages can be taught or passed along by somebody sitting you down and directly explaining to you that money don't grow on trees, that you got to work hard for your money, that it's important to save cash and to have assets, or it can be indirect teaching through observation. So you watch your parent work 12-hour shifts for 7 days a week. You watch how your mom sits down with a checkbook and goes through and budgets and does the bills. You're learning about money even if there's no intentional teaching that's happening at that time. What I have found is that what you observe and what you were directly taught about money influences the way that you view money and the way that you interact with it, the way that you relate with it. And what I'm finding is that, couples have distinct and biased and nuanced backgrounds as far as their childhoods and their upbringings. And so that influences the money messages that they receive. And so subsequently, what happens is that couples come together and they have different ideas and beliefs and behaviors surrounding money. And I think about marriage as not only a social union, but also a financial union. You know, you're coming together, you have shared financial responsibilities, and it can be very difficult. It can strain a relationship for you all to not be on the same page financially. And so that's what I'm finding more so in Black families. You would like to think that, you know, if you're college educated, you know, then we have the same money personality. No, absolutely not. For first generation college students, a lot of times they're coming from places of lower socioeconomic status. They're coming from a place of, this is my first opportunity to have money, to buy things that I have always wanted. And so sometimes that produces not so good financial behaviors, not so good financial attitudes that you have to learn through experience. And then you say, oh, I'm not going to do that again with the credit card. And you go back and you clean up your mess, and then you move forward from a healthier and wiser perspective. So, you know, what I would say about couples, and particularly Black families, is that, you know, the experiences that our parents have had, a lot of that has traversed over onto the newer generations. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily help. A lot of our ancestors, I say ancestors, not even 2 or 3 generations back, they experienced unfair financial practices with banks. They experience unfair practices when it comes to buying real estate, with the redlining that was present. For those who don't know, redlining is essentially, it was kind of a subtle, oppressive system, institutionalized system, where there were red lines drawn around neighborhoods. And in those particular neighborhoods, those prices were severely inflated because it was likely for Black people to build and want to buy in those places. It was redlined in such a way that if you wanted to receive a loan, that you receive inflated interest rates. And so a lot of our, I think about my grandfather, he was big on cash. I'm not putting my money in the bank. And because of some of those unfair banking practices, you know, you move forward and pass that on to current generations. So now it creates a barrier for trust, you know, to say, we're going to invest in the stock market, you know, we're going to invest in real estate, because there's these kind of double messages that are being told that as newer generations or younger generations, you need to invest, you need to have real estate, and you need to be involved in the larger economic system, not just African American or Black economics, but then you have previous generations who know different, you know, from their experiences. So it's so much that I can say into that, but the upbringing that you've been situated in and the money messages that you received growing up, they certainly influence how you show up as an adult, and then that influences the relationship because it's the financial union.
Those little things and big things, right? Or not just big things, but those little things, in the sense of that money messaging and two becoming one and being on one accord. A funny story I always tell, you know, I met my wife in 95. We started dating in 96. We were married in 2003. And we had our first child in 2007. And what do you start losing teeth at? Probably like 4, maybe 4, 5, something like that. And a discussion, again, dating for a very long time, married for several years. You think you know somebody and really appreciate that you can get on one accord, be on one accord. And I remember we start having a discussion about the tooth fairy.
Yes.
And specifically, like, what was the tooth fairy leaving for this first tooth? And I remember looking at her and I was like, who are you? Like, what, are you crazy? And I mean, so again, to your point, in the sense of, you know, just these money messages and what that means. I mean, clearly we were, you know, I grew up, I'm one of 4 boys, and she's one of 2. She's the baby girl and 6 years removed from her brother. So very different situations in the sense of what the tooth fairy might bring the baby girl to 6 years removed, compared to, I'm a number 2 like you, Dr. Baity, right? I'm, you know, being the second child and, you know, 2 more to go. That's a very different setup in the household of what the tooth fairy was bringing some coins, not paper. That was a very shocking situation. Like, oh my God, what are we, who are you? So And that's just something small, like the tooth fairy. These other situations, like you said, cars or homes or levels of travel or eating out or savings or stock or real estate, all these things can be very, very complex. Like you said, based on your upbringing and your awareness, your education. Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. You said that was a bomb you just dropped. I'm still adjusting. Yeah, that's so true. And speaking of which, when you treat as predominantly African American couples, what are some other like hurdles that you see these couples face that prevent them from accomplishing a healthy relationship?
Sure, sure. What I see is unaddressed childhood trauma. We have survival in our DNA. I just read a very informative article over the weekend. It was published on Apple News, and it was talking about how traces of your parents' trauma shows up in your children. And so what I have found, not only just in research and consuming research, but also in my practice, is that those traces of your childhood trauma, they certainly show up at some point in your relationships. I tell my couples all the time that relationships are like a mirror. So if you've been running away from your childhood trauma and the impact that it has on you, if you have suppressed it or repressed it and tucked it away, relationships have a very interesting way of holding that mirror up and showing you that these are still areas that need to be addressed. These are areas that need to be healed. So I will say that childhood trauma shows up in my couple therapy issues. Communication shows up in couple therapy, issues around vulnerability. You love this person, but I'm still very protective of me. Can I give you the most private and protective and sensitive parts of myself, and trust you not to weaponize those things against me, trust you not to leave me, trust you not to in any type of way use that to hurt me later on or view me as less. So vulnerability is a big piece. The other piece is also conflict resolution styles. Again, how you were socialized as a child. What kind of conflict did you see growing up? How did people do conflict? Did they scream and slam doors and leave the home and no type of repair happen? No type of coming back together happen? Did they talk over each other? Did they call each other names? Those kind of things come up in couples therapy. You have to learn that unfortunately, a lot of times, our parents, they gave us what they had. They gave us what were given to them. And sometimes those were dysfunctional, unhealthy ways of relating to each other. And so a lot of times couples come in having to learn what they learned in a very intentional way and unlearn those healthy ways of relating. And then now you're learning the new and healthier ways of relating. We just kind of, money and love is one of those things is that you're going to experience at some point in life, but there's no real formal training about how to navigate those two spaces well. So that's what couples therapy mostly comes in. I do work with couples who have experienced infidelity, how to work through forgiveness and repairing trust. I work with couples who are trying to decide, is it in our best interest to continue to stay together, or is it healthier for us as individuals and our children to go separate ways? A lot of times people, they call and they say, what's your success rate with therapy, couples therapy? And I say, well, a lot of times we think that marriage therapy or couples therapy is successful if the couple stays together. And that's not necessarily true, because it might just set the stage for an opportunity to have these meaningful conversations, these completely transparent conversations, so that you can make a best informed decision about, is this the best space for us to exist in, or do we need to transition our relationship? So I like the word transition relationships rather than dissolution, because most of the time that's what relationships do. They don't completely dissolve, particularly when there are children involved and when there was a previous friendship that started the relationship.
That's a lot,
Yeah.
Tacoma.
Yes.
Listen, whew, but we could break this down.
Yeah.
Hey,
Mic drop. Yeah.
she's talking about weaponizing vulnerability. That's a
Yes.
whole nother discussion in itself.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Baity, we might have to get into a little bit more of that. I mean, you are right. You want to be with somebody that can cover you and protect you and love you and lift you up. And I have always said, I mean, I just said to somebody recently, in the sense of becoming a husband, becoming a father. I mean, clearly you can't be the person you used to be. That shouldn't exist, right? You are a different individual, and you have different responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
But while you are learning these things, and you to really provide, kind of your true self to somebody, hopefully in that relationship, you're offering more of yourself every day and giving more of yourself to them, so they can really understand who you are and how they can, love on you and cover you and things of that nature. But you are right. You're also creating, less barriers for them to understand you, which to your point, they also have, the keys to be able to touch those points. And that's hard, especially in difficult times.
Yes.
We used to do a lot of marriage retreats, and one of the things one of the things we learned is about not using these words that can harm, not using these words that can damage.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You really got to learn how to fight fair, right? And as we know, somebody can say something to you that you don't care about, you don't consider, and you can brush that off. And somebody that you care about, right? I have a great relationship with Tacoma. Somebody, he says something small, and I might be thinking about that thing 3 days later. Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Say that, right? I mean, it's and as we all know, you have a very close relationship with somebody, especially romantically, a partner, and somebody could say something or even not say something, I think, and slice you in half. So it is that is a very interesting dynamic, Dr. Baity, in the sense of wanting to give yourself fully to somebody and give them full access so they can understand and help you grow and heal and cover you, but also you're giving them full access to be able to provide damage if the situation calls for it. That's that's challenging.
Yes. And I think the biggest piece I want to add on to that is you got to know that in love, there is going to be hurt. You're in love, you're relating to another human being, and they're not going to be blameless. They're not going to be without mistakes. And so in offering vulnerability, also recognize that there's going to be a little bit of a sting that comes back in that, maybe not intentionally, but that person, as they're growing, evolving, and learning healthier ways to relate to you, to deal with hurt, to deal with disappointment, is that, they're going to make mistakes, as they're getting better. And I would say as they mature in, just emotional management, regulation, better dealing with difficult situations, just getting, I'm a firm believer in God and the word. And so just getting a better bearing on what your role and position is that the stings will happen less often. And because there's a body of knowledge that person is working from. But in those earlier times, in that relationship, you can expect that whether it's intentionally and a lot of times unintentionally, that hurt will happen even when you offer that vulnerability. And so I talk a lot about forgiveness. I talk a lot about what is not just saying, oh, I cancel your debts, but it's also the atonement, the commitment, and the change behavior to say, I'm never going to hurt you in this way again. I had to learn one time, but I'm going to take that with me, and you'll never have to experience that over again.
Wow. Whoa, that's heavy. it's in our name, but we are Black Men's Health, and we deal with a range of topics that impact our holistic wellness, and relationships are chief among those. And it just appears to me, being a Black man of a certain age, is that we get our cues about masculinity and how to be a man in relationship with women from sometimes questionable sources, whether it's pop culture, whether it's examples in our neighborhood or in our families. And so, with that said, I wanted to get your perspective on some of the hurdles that stop us as Black men from having these healthy relationships. And I saw that in your bio when I was reading it off. You're serving a demographic from 20 to 45 a lot of times.
Yes.
And even within that demographic of men, are there differences? So it's a two-part question. One, what are some of the hurdles that you see us grappling with? And how do those change or stay the same as Black men get older, or even as they're young people?
Sure. I think something that came to my mind, Father's Day was very right on time. I feel like for this discussion, I got to see a lot of Black males' perspectives on what it is to be a man and a father. And that goes beyond informing what I see in my therapy rooms, because I do work with quite a few Black men as clients. And a lot of times the societal message, the top message inside of the home, is that men are providers and protectors, and that's it. You don't have any range outside of that. You have no business dealing with emotions. You have no business dealing with being nurturing, caring, supporting, all those kind of things. If you're making money and you're protecting your family, then you're enough. And the thing is that those are very vital pieces of being a very healthy and full and comprehensive partner, spouse, father. But there's so much more. And so a lot of times that's missed. And so men get into relationships and they say, well, I'm excelling in my career, how I've always been is working really well in the spaces I'm typically in. But now that I'm with a woman, she's telling me that I'm not hitting the mark. I'm missing something. There are parts of me that are immature. And I love the word immature. A lot of times people, hear it as kind of a slight, like childish, but it just simply defined, it means underdeveloped. There are parts of you emotionally, socially, psychologically, they're underdeveloped. The development might have been skewed or might have been distorted from some type of childhood trauma or pain, or early relationship trauma or pain, whether it's with a parent or whether it's with, early romantic relationship partners. And so when Black men come into session with me, I find that for the first time, they're like, somebody actually cares about how I feel. And that breaks my heart, because I'm like, you're a human. You're a human. You're beyond the finances that you bring to the table. You're beyond your strength. John Wilson, I want to make sure, I think it's, let me make sure that I'm saying his name correctly, because I don't want to say this, speak out of turn, because I'm such a fan of him. Jason Wilson, I'm sorry. He is a Black man who, I came across an interview that he did on the Breakfast Club, and he coined this term of teaching Black boys and Black men how to be a comprehensive man rather than just a masculine man. And he defines that as a man that is full of compassion and courage. So he is your traditional provider and protector, but he also can be empathic. He's also in tune with his emotions. He also can be present and supportive of the emotions of his children. He is humble enough to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake and I'm going to do better. He can be gentle, but also strong. And that definition in and of itself, I am teaching along with the likes of Jason Wilson and others about this newly evolved, more comprehensive definition of what a man is, because being aggressive, being a provider and protector, it works excellent maybe in your peer groups with other men. Perhaps it works excellent in the workspace, especially for Black men, where you have to be this strong driving force and there's not very much room for emotion. But when you come inside of your home, you know, you have to drop your sword all the time. You have to drop your defenses so that you can relate, you know, so that you can be touched on a spiritual level beneath your skin. So that's what I see a lot for Black men, in the sense of the definition of traditional, what it is to be a man, and then also just this evolving definition by the help of the likes of Jason Wilson and those with similar mindsets.
I think that underdeveloped word is powerful.
Yes.
I know you reference immature, and you're right. A lot of times men are immature in so many different things, but underdeveloped is powerful.
That's
I mean,
it.
so many times I say, you know, again, you heard me say I'm one of 4 boys, and these women, at least for us, these women in our lives for us, I say have helped round us out, right? Because to your point, your experiences, I mean, we were raised in certain ways. We're definitely raised with chivalry. We were definitely raised with respect, things of that nature. But we're definitely raised to protect and provide and cover and things of that nature. But in that, we lose a lot of things. So I might not know, you know, 50 colors of the rainbow compared to just the primary blue, black. You know, my wife said something about eggplant or seafoam, or I had no idea what, you know, she was talking. I mean, for real, none. Or talking about thread count, or you know, like no idea at all. I mean, just a lot of things. So yeah, that underdeveloped is a huge part. And I think for men, understanding that we're underdeveloped, and there's so much that we could learn and be developed as a more well-rounded human being and partner and lover and friend, and is super valuable.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, and it raises a question in my mind, because we talked about infidelity earlier, but I also want to get your experience or your perspective on what ways have Black men, have you seen, we've been victimized in these relationships as well, because there are 2 sides to every story, you know, and oftentimes I feel like a lot of men feel like their story isn't told enough. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yes, as far as Black men and relationships, their experiences, or particular to infidelity, or both?
Or both.
Okay, yes. So, yes, women are not blameless when it comes to being unhealthy relationship partners, when it comes to listening to larger majority culture that is grounded in the extreme level of feminism. I have to check myself. My fiance has to pull me back a little bit sometimes, because there's this message of independence and strength, and I don't need you, and I can do this by myself, and I'm overpowering you. And it's beautiful to be powerful, but it's even more beautiful to recognize that there are powers on both sides of the sexes, and when they come together, they synergize, and they can create something much greater than the individuals can create by themselves. It's funny, I recently had a conversation with a client. The full session was about city girl culture. I don't know. I don't know if you all are familiar with that, but essentially defined as city girl culture is kind of, you know, men are disposable, they're tools, we use you for your money, and then we go on about our day and we have fun, and you know, you're not going to control us and lock us down and all these kind of things. Also, there's a huge element of materialism. You got to have designer brands and make this kind of money, and that's all I'm interested in you for. And what it does is it reduces down the value of a man in a woman's life. And that culture is so dangerous because it's so widespread on social media. You have so many young girls who are watching these women who appear successful because they have the designer and the hair and the lashes and all those things, but they're absorbing these divisive messages between men and women as well. And men are feeling that. They're experiencing that. They're feeling that what's my purpose and my place in a woman's life now? Because, Black women are the most highly educated group. They are excelling as entrepreneurs and business owners and in their careers. And going back to these earlier traditional definitions of a man, provide and protect. Well, if she's doing my job, that leaves me out of a position. Where is my role here? And so a lot of men are expressing to me that they feel like, what is my place in my relationship, in my family? I'm being substituted, by the woman doing it all. And again, it's not to say that women just kind of popped up one day and say, hey, men, we don't need you. A lot of times women were hurt or they were disappointed by men who a lot of times started with their fathers, who did not measure up or did not meet the need. And they learned very early on that I got to be everything because dad was never there for me to do that for me or mom. So I'm seeing this showing up in the therapy space, and it's hurtful to Black women, it's hurtful to Black men. And my prayer, my work is to show that it doesn't mean that it lessens your capability if you need a man as a woman. It doesn't lessen your capability as a man if you need a woman. It simply just says that you can humble yourself to work in a teamwork capacity to create something greater.
So back to fidelity.
Yes.
And infidelity.
Yes.
I don't even know the question to ask. It's so complex.
Yes.
But it is something that Takuma and I talked about when we first reached out, healthy relationships, fidelity and fidelity and infidelity.
Yes.
Just how can men stay on the right track, right? We clearly understand that there are forces that get men off track when they shouldn't be off track. Obviously, we have made certain promises that we need to stand by and honor. But we also have seen in the world that doesn't always happen like that. So again, before we even talk about forgiveness and if somebody's got off course and things of that nature, what about just staying on course? What's your offerings to couples, men and women, that are looking to just stay on track?
Sure. I want to speak to believers, because that's my viewpoint. I do identify as a Christian. I believe that when you enter a covenant into marriage, it's not just a covenant with that woman. It's not just with that other person, your spouse, but it's a covenant with God. And when you are making a commitment and a promise to God, from my perspective, because as you will find, if you look up behind me, I have all of my secular degrees, but ahead of that is my ordained minister certificate that goes beyond all the other work and training I've ever had. And saying that to say is that I believe that there's a higher standard and expectation that we are urged to adhere to when we have God in the relationship. And so you ask about how do you stay on track? Well, if you can't stay on track for your wife because she's getting on your nerves this week, she's not obliging to what your needs are, whether they're emotional needs or physical needs, can you adhere to God's standard and expectation of you? Can you adhere to the commitment and the covenant that you made with God? And so I speak to believers in that sense of that can be an additional point of accountability that, of course, you don't want to disappoint yourself. You don't want to disappoint your wife, but you certainly don't want to disappoint God. And so that can be helpful for believers. But as far as, those who are not there yet or do not have the relationship with God, or those who do have a relationship with God, and you say, is it possible for me to be faithful? Is it possible for me to not be lured into the lust of the world, so to speak? Is that environment and exposure is important. I think about lust and sex and infidelity and all those things, just like any other substance, any other vice that you might have struggled with. If you put a glass of wine in front of a recovering alcoholic, they're going to be more likely to regress back into the use. It's more likely that they will be tempted to think about it more, to crave it more because it's in your presence. And so I'm not saying that as men or women that you have to live in a bubble, so to speak, but also just be mindful about the environments that you're in that could provoke those temptations to the surface. Be mindful about the situations that you are in the sense of, if you can pick up on a person's spirit, that there's a lustful spirit, that they do not respect relationships, they do not respect your position as a husband or as a wife, be mindful about being in scenarios with that person that could put you in a vulnerable position for things to happen that you won't be proud of later. And I will also say that it's an ongoing practice. It's something that over time, it is kind of like you get stronger in doing it. Your defenses get stronger. Another piece also is, hopefully, if you can, be transparent with your spouse about where you are, about your temptations, about your struggles, so that they can pray for you and with you about that. If you just say, oh no, I'm, act like I'm blind or something. I mean, you're married, you're in an exclusive relationship, you're not blind. You're still a human. And attraction is appealing, to the senses. And so sometimes that can lead our minds into places that we've been in our past, because we're constantly still kind of what I call digging out the gunk, of our experiences, particularly physical and sexual experiences and cravings and appetites that we've developed. And so having a spouse that can sit down with you, talk it out with you, process it, go to therapy for yourself, go to couples therapy together and have these difficult conversations so that you all can grow and hold each other accountable in those spaces. That reduces the likelihood that fidelity will happen. Fidelity grows in under two conditions: where there are secrets that are present, and then also if there is an unmet need, particularly if they have been communicated for far too long and the other spouse is dismissive about it. It's not that a person wakes up one day and says, I'm going to go cheat on my spouse. What they do is they go to their regular spaces, usually at work, maybe a local coffee shop. There's a person that comes into their atmosphere that just willingly showers them with what they've been longing for in their marriage. So a lot of times emotional infidelity occurs. We always think about, physical infidelity, but a lot of times people just say, she just listens to me. She asks me about my day. She cares, how I feel. She wants to know about my hopes and my dreams and things that stress me out. And every time that I talk to her, she's not just bringing me an issue or a problem or something that I have not done well. Right there, emotional infidelity, it builds from there. And then also the physical piece as well, it's being mindful about, physical intimacy is just as important as all other parts of intimacy in a well-rounded, comprehensive, healthy relationship. And so if you and your partner have different sex drives, don't just dismiss it, because if that person is talking to you about it and they're saying, I want more of you, this is what this means to me, and you ignore that, then again, you're setting your spouse up to be vulnerable to when a person comes in their atmosphere and they freely offer that to them, for them to fall into that trap of infidelity. And it's very difficult. I think about a person that's in a desert and they haven't had water for 7 days, and somebody walks along with a nice bottle of Fiji water, they're going to take it in with no hesitation. And so infidelity it works in a very similar way.
That's a lot, Takuma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's we got like 5 minutes left. Wow.
That's a lot, brother.
I wish we had more.
That's a lot. That's good stuff. That's good stuff, Dr. Baity.
Yeah.
Dr. Baity, speaking of city girl culture,
Yeah.
this is how old I am, right?
Yeah.
One day, I started seeing City Boys Up by 1,000.
Oh yeah.
And I literally texted some of my young partners, my young homeboys from my grad program. I was like, So what does it mean? What does that mean? City boys up by 1,000. I had a detailed explanation.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I am old.
That's right.
Wow.
Thank you for the breakdown. I knew pieces of that,
Yeah.
which was enough for me.
Yeah.
Man.
Yes, yes.
So I know we're going near the tail end. We
Mm,
always like to talk about just things that people watching this, especially Black men,
yes.
things that they could take with them. One is why therapy, and
Mm.
what, when it works, what does that look like? How will that help us?
Oh, yes, yes. So why therapy? A lot of times people say, I don't need therapy. I have the gym. I have, my family to talk to. I have God. And the thing is that therapy gives you tools, and it gives you a space that's unlike no other. When you talk to a friend, when you talk to a family member, when you go to the gym, you may experience through therapeutic effects, which essentially mean you feel a little bit better, you feel a little bit lighter, but it's not getting to the root of the issue. It's addressing the symptoms. So I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel frustrated. Talking to a friend, going to the gym will relieve the symptom temporarily. But what you will find is that you have to maintain those behaviors in order for that feeling not to come back. So what therapy does is it gets down to the root of the issue so that the fruit, which is that symptom, will not continue to reoccur and come back, or it will come back less frequently and less intense. So therapy is a safe space that you can talk with a professional from a scientific clinical perspective and training, will help you to better understand the condition that you're at, the symptoms that you have. I am huge on psychoeducation. I love helping to explain the science behind what you're experiencing. One, to properly distribute the accountability, as to why you're going through what you're going through, or why you behave in that way. Because sometimes we just beat ourselves up. We say, I know what I need to do. I know I want to be better, but I can't just keep doing this thing. What's wrong with me? And so I help to redistribute the accountability as to what is attributing to these behaviors. Also learning about healthy coping skills, having additional accountability about, are you practicing these helping coping skills? And then also, it's just a space of allowing you to just decompress all the things that you've been carrying over the years that are very private, they're very sensitive, and legally they cannot exit the bounds of that space in that room. And so it gives you a level of just confidentiality, a level of education. I think about therapy, I'm very much so a teacher, and I taught classes at Florida State undergrad when I was in my Ph.D. And I think about therapy as a private classroom, but it gives you an opportunity to participate more in an intimate way, that you don't have a full audience. It's just yourself and the therapist, or yourself and whoever's in the therapy room with you. And so it can be life-changing. And also it's a place to be heard, to be truly heard and empathize with, and not judged. A lot of times you go to family and friends and you say, I don't know if I want to tell them that part, because a listening ear is a running mouth. You hear that a lot of times. And so, it's kind of nerve-wracking to do that, but you get that sense of confidence and peace with therapy, because legally it's bound into that space. And so, also you get an opportunity where the person is not adding their 2 cents in from their experiences. And I know people mean well when they're doing that. They're trying to say, I get you, I relate, I see you. But in therapy, we're taught to hold space for people, and we don't have to say, hey, I've been there before too. You can just literally take in what that person is saying. Don't talk over them. Don't add in what your own personal anecdotal experiences are. And therapy is it's a very sacred and beautiful space to be in. And so it's just, I think of me being a therapist as such a privilege, opportunity and calling to work through. So.
Well, we appreciate it, and we will look to have you back we might
Yes,
have to,
yes,
we might have to dive into some specifics, Takuma,
yeah,
from our community.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, it's been a pleasure, Dr. Beatty.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time. And wow.
Wow.
That's all I gotta say. Wow.
There's a lot here.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yes.
Good
Yes.
A
stuff.
lot. We'll have to do this some more for sure.
Absolutely. Well, it was a pleasure. I thank you all so much for the important work that you're doing, being champions of men's health. You know, it's not all the time just about the physical, but you're capturing the mental health aspect, the relational aspect, the spiritual aspect, you know, to really build that comprehensive man, which, you know, is the most healthiest version for themselves and also the people they're connected to. So it was such a joy, honor to be here with you all today. And I look forward to more discussions, more rich discussions in the future.
Dr. Beatty, before we jump, what
Yes.
is, if somebody wants to connect with you, how do they connect with you?
Yes. So there's multiple ways to connect with me. If you want to connect with me on social media, I am on Instagram at onward.and.upward.therapy. So it's onward and upward therapy with the dots separating the words. I'm also on Facebook as Cortnie S. Baity, Ph.D. LMFT. That's the business page. As far as direct communication, you may call the practice at 850-296-8799, as well as you can directly email me at BAITYMFT@gmail.com.
Excellent. Well, we thank you for your time and attention, Dr. Beatty, your expertise and experience, and we'll look to do it again. Okay.
Absolutely. You all have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
You as well.
Respect.
Thank you. Bye-bye.